We are over half done. Day 8, IDA. So we kind of wrap things up. We have done, in terms of the curriculum, chapters 1 through 6. We've taken a test over chapters 1 to 3, and on Tuesday we have a test on chapters 4, 5, and 6. Foundations, cryptography. So, right down here, foundations, cryptography. So, in the foundations, we studied the Glumberton cube. So we had this key thing, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And then off there we talked about the states of data and how can we maintain security with this. So with cryptography we talked about encryption, hashing, and what we can do to maintain availability. So we kind of took care of that. Didn't do a lot today on the Linux project, but the whole idea is having something where we can start applying security to some real machines and some real people and so forth. And then I mentioned the terms can get a little daunting, but just hang in there. The more you use them, the better off we'll understand them. And this project's really open to the discretion of the people working on it. Then we got started on your security plan today. Everybody picked a business, and they started planning the security, and it fits under the skills part of the course. Next step. This whole section, I'm not going to run through it all, but we talked about different things that seemed interesting or cool things we're learning. What are we really learning in the class? What do you feel like you're learning? What things? And it was good. We mentioned, I mentioned HVAC. What does that got to do with security? We talked about the target scenario that happened a number of years ago. I talked about how things were set up at Newman. And, this whole thing with point of sale and so forth. We reviewed a little bit risk. We talked about you got to be able to analyze it, then you have to manage the risk. We're going to talk a lot more about managing the risk. We mentioned assets. If you lose assets, quantitative, you can measure it somehow with numbers. Yeah, the students did a good job. Qualitative, we use the term opinion, but it's really, it's hard to, you can't quantify it, but it can have repercussions. We used the pandemic as an example. Colleges, they can measure in dollars how much money of lost revenue that is not coming in with dorms, but yet they're still paying to heat them and clean them and whatever you're doing to maintain those buildings. So you can measure that loss. With the change in classes, how much of an impact has that had on learning? How do you, that's a qualitative thing. How do you measure that? It's different with every student. If there's some type of impact, for some students, it could be an improved impact, especially if they were driving in and on the road 2 hours a day or 45 minutes a day in and out, or in other students, a big impact at home where they can't. There's not a good study environment. Their internet isn't as good as at the college and so forth. So how do you measure that? But it's having an impact. So that's qualitative. The quality of your establishment. We talked about it. If a bank gets hacked, and that information then can damage their reputation. Okay. Terms, we should be able to identify things like, hashing, encryption, different types of these that allow us to do a public private key. I mentioned, yeah, symmetric and asymmetric. Where does that fit in for each of these? These terms here you should start getting down. Know those pretty well. How they fit in. Maybe not defining each, but where do they fit in general categories. So, students worked on their business, starting their security plan. They got me the name, what the business does. This fits under our skills part of the work. Sam gave an example of Fox River. David on some clothing, secure property management. Angie talked about the company she's going to work with. So we're working towards some kind of policy, but in order to be able to create the policy, we have to understand the business. Okay? Then we did a walkthrough with Palo Alto. Within there, there's a place where I ran across DLL. So I reviewed, you have source code. Source code is compiled or interpreted into object code, and object code is linked using other resources, depending on your operating system, into an executable that the computer can actually execute. The wrap-up. Our business example, we talked about the landscape, technology and security, what impacts can we have, okay? I talked a little bit about IP addressing and what kind of threats, so that depends on your business, what kind of threats, who can carry those out, would they be internal or external or both, okay? What threat agents and how, what could they do, you know, what are the vectors, what things can happen, and then how vulnerable is the business. You know, we're trying to get some level here, and then we're creating a draft that'll lead to some kind of policies, and then what we want to talk about is risk, and then are we going to mitigate it, or what we're going to do in managing that risk. And that's it for the week.